Hi, I'm Morgan Pope, and I'm interviewing Patrick Glass. I just need to know a few questions at the beginning for the library. Where were you born?
I was born in Wichita, Kansas.
And what unit were you in?
I was in a lot of units in 25 years, but my primary service was in the 1st Cavalry Division.
Okay, in the Army?
Yes.
Which wars did you serve in?
Vietnam.
Okay, so because of your different posts, you were at different posts?
I served a bunch of places between the Rocky Mountains and the East Coast.
What kind of medals did you receive?
Oh, Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, bunch of air medals, Vietnam Service and Campaign medals, Army Commendation Medal, and some other just general service stuff, Ranger tab.
Okay, were you enlisted or did you draft?
I was commissioned through ROTC from at that time, the University of Wichita. It's Wichita State University now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, tell me about your first days of service.
Well, my first days of service were really the engineer officer basic course. Once I received all the paperwork necessary, mm-hmm. I graduated in June, and they actually managed to lose some paperwork somewhere, mm-hmm. and finally sent me orders in August and said, hightail it from Colorado, where I was at the time, mm-hmm. To Fort Belvoir, Virginia. So the first 6 weeks of my military service were at the engineer officer basic course at Fort Belvoir, along with 51 other regular Army officers. A couple of them from West Point, most of us ROTC.
What was your assignment while you were at the beginning?
Well, typically with the Army, what happens is they say, you're going to this place, and when you get there, they send you someplace else. My orders had me going to Fort Belvoir and then out to serve with the 5th Mechanized Division, mm-hmm. at Fort Carson, Colorado. As it happened, they said, before you go over there, we want to send you down to Ranger School. So I spent about 2.5 months running up and down the hills and slogging through the swamps, earning my Ranger tab. And then when I got to to Fort Carson, the 5th Mechanized Division, about the beginning of 1968, they said, gee whiz, we're going to send you on down here and on down here. And by the time they finished shuffling me from pillar to post, I found myself a member of the 613th Engineer Battalion, which was a 5th Army unit. It wasn't part of the 5th Division. Okay. I was a platoon leader in a combat engineer company.
Did you ever see combat?
Yeah. I spent a year in Vietnam as an aviator.
Was anybody in your unit injured or a casualty?
Well, we were amazingly lucky. The aircraft that I flew, this thing, as a matter of fact, the Chinook, is a cargo helicopter. So we weren't doing combat assaults, the things that you see on TV all the time, with lots of bullets flying all the time, although we did get shot at. We did lose people. Generally speaking, if you lost people, you lost them to maintenance or materiel failure rather than enemy action. In the year I was there, we only lost 1 air crew. Unfortunately, that was my roommate and the company commander. That's how I became the company commander, was when he was killed.
What was the typical day while you were an aviator?
In Vietnam? Mm-hmm. Well, I actually had 2 jobs in Vietnam, so I'll only give you 2 days as quickly as I can. When I first got there, I was an operational pilot. I was one of the senior captains in the company, so I had to learn to be what they call a mission commander. We would send usually about 7 or 8 aircraft out to a specific portion of the cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division's area of operations, and somebody had to be in charge of those 6 or 7 aircraft, make sure that the various missions that we had been given were taken care of. And in our case, missions meant picking something up from one place and taking it someplace else.
Okay.
I was on the job training for that. I did that for quite a while. It tended to be busy days. There were 3 companies like us, and there were 3 brigades in the cavalry division, so each one of us worked with a different brigade each day. But what would usually happen is one of the units would have mechanical problems, there would be other problems in the AO, there would be weather issues, all kinds of things could slow you down. And then they would say, well, fine, you guys are beginning to finish up over here, why don't you send 2 or 3 of your aircraft over yonder, help out these guys, and so forth. And what it boiled down to is if you flew Chinooks for the 1st Cavalry Division, they woke you up at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, so that you could get shaved and eaten. And you had to go out and you had to do a pre-flight of the aircraft, which is no small feat for one of these guys, and have it run up ready to take off 1 hour before first flight. The logic being, if you found a problem, you would have time to fix it before you had to leave. First flight, you lifted off. Because of the size of the division and the number of aircraft that we had, one of our problems was you couldn't put us all in one place. So we were spread out all over the 3rd Tactical Zone, 3rd Corps as they call it, in Vietnam. And in some cases we had to fly for 45 minutes before we got to where we could start doing any work. So which is another issue involved. Blade time on those things is kind of expensive too. But we would get to the area of operations and we'd start flying the loads. There were major base camps where the brigade headquarters were located, and these would have what they call log pads, log being for logistics. That's where you picked up the loads and you took them out to the fire support bases. Fire support base would usually be an infantry battalion, something roughly that size, and you would fly out with the things that couldn't be flown out in a smaller aircraft. So we were flying water. Water was a major issue in Vietnam. Of course, you couldn't exactly drill a well every time you landed people. And with the heat and everything, water was vital. So we carried water. We carried artillery ammunition, an awful lot of artillery ammunition, and we carried artillery pieces as well. One of the things that a Chinook gave the cavalry a capability of doing was something they called the artillery ambush. And if you picture an area where there's a war going on, like Vietnam, we'd have fire support bases here, here, and here. And anybody with any information at all knew that, okay, if the fire support base is here, he has artillery tubes in it, and they can fire this far, so they can draw a circle around it. And they can draw a circle around the other fire support bases, and they can say, well, there's an area where they can't shoot at me. So that was where the Viet Cong and North Vietnam's Army and so forth would put their base camps and so forth, their recreational sites and whatever. Well, if we had reason to get our intelligence that they were out there someplace, what we would do is we would come up with what they called an artillery ambush. And that is, we would find a location that was big enough and open enough to put a battery of artillery. A battery of artillery is about 5 artillery pieces. And we would airlift in a company of infantry. That would be by Huey. They would secure the area very quickly. Right behind them would be us. And we would have, on the hook, underneath the aircraft, we would have a 105 millimeter howitzer. Hanging below that was a big web bag they called an A-22 bag, which had the artillery ammunition in it. And up in the cargo compartment, we had the gun crew.
That manned the howitzer? That
mans the howitzer. And we could, by the time we got there, they had what they called pathfinders. Were on the ground, and they had staked out the locations that they wanted the tubes placed. And they would throw, and you would say, you're inbound, and they'd say, Roger, put your piece on the yellow smoke, and somebody else putting his piece on the red smoke, and so forth. Well, you put it in on the red smoke or the yellow smoke, you set down the ammunition, you slack the slings a little bit, move to the side, set the tube down, then you punched the load off, which meant you released the sling so it wasn't attached to the aircraft anymore, Then you moved over to the side again and you set the aircraft down, lowered a ramp, and the crew ran out. And as soon as they were off the ground, we could pull pitch and get out of there. And in the 1st Cavalry Division, 1 minute later, those guys could have a round headed downrange. So they were putting artillery fire into places that would consider themselves secure. All of a sudden, they're getting full battery fire for effect. So.
Do you have like a memorable event or experience, or several?
Oh, for combat, probably would have to be the day my roommate died. By that time, I had moved from a platoon leader of an operational platoon to the company's maintenance officer. I was responsible for keeping 18 of those things were flying, which is kind of interesting because we didn't have enough engines and blades for all of them at any one time. So when one would finish up 100 hours and have to do major maintenance, we would pull blades off of it, put it on one that was coming out of maintenance, and it was kind of an interesting little musical chairs game, I guess, you know. But I had taken off in the afternoon to pick up a repair part from another location, and was killing a little time en route by talking to a friend of mine at Benoit Army Base. Guy I had flown with in flight school, and was the operations officer for the engineer brigade located down there. And I was just chewing the fat with him, and all of a sudden my co-pilot grabs the controls from me and just snatches the aircraft away from me, rolls it into a hard right bank. And you don't do that kind of thing in an aircraft. You know, it's always, you have the aircraft, I have the aircraft, you have the aircraft. Positive control. So I came off the radio, went to the intercom, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "The old man's down." About that time he rolled level and I saw a plume of smoke. And sure enough, we had my roommate and his crew, pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, gunner, and crew chief, had gone into the jungle south of Van Rang, I guess it was. Rang. And, well, let's just say circling over your roommate's pyre is not the best way to spend your day.
No.
Put it that way.
I know it must have been hard to be away from your home and your family. How did you keep in touch with them?
Well, in those days we had this fantastic technology known as cassette tapes. And I don't think I wrote more than 2 or 3 letters in the entire time I was there. We sent back and forth cassette tapes. I'd send her one, she'd send me one. I'd tape over what she sent me, she'd tape over what I sent her, and so forth. The only paper that really got well, it wasn't even that. Really wasn't paper. It got sent back and forth as when I was taking pictures. I would take the pictures, and instead of having them developed in Vietnam, which I could do, and then I'd throw them in my foot locker and they would get mildew and stuff like that. Why bother? I would, frankly, I would just have them processed by a mail order firm and sent home. So she would get mail there, and she would get the pictures. I saw them only after I got home. Which led to a little confusion one time. I had to send her an emergency cassette one time. We had an aircraft that, from a sister company that was down on to visit us, and they had asked for some parts they couldn't get. Mm-hmm. We provided them for them. They brought back some other stuff for us. And when they were taxiing away, they had a blade strike the forward head of their aircraft hit the back aft head of one of our parked aircraft, and their aircraft was totally destroyed in the course of all that. And I took a lot of pictures of it, and then I did my usual thing, sent it off, and I realized she's going to get these things. She's going to think that's us.
When you say she, is this your wife?
My wife. My son was born about 6 months before I left.
That must have been really hard.
Oh, I got to tell you, I love my wife. I love her dearly and always have. But leaving the kid was tough.
Did she send you pictures or?
She was pretty good about that. She sent me pictures of him, and of course, between 6 months and 18 months, there's an awful lot going on. When I came home, he was walking, and she would show him pictures of me, and he learned to say "daddy" and stuff like that. But when I got home, I looked down. Here's this kid walking along like this with his mother, and he's kind of looking up at me as like, "Who's the guy?"
How long were you in Vietnam?
How old was I?
How long were you in
How
Vietnam?
long was I? I'm sorry. One thing about Chinooks is it ruins your ears. I was in Vietnam from January of 1970 to January of 1971. I did a full 365 days. And I'm thankful for it because that means I didn't get shot.
True. I know between runs you had some time down. How did you pass the time?
We were fortunate in that the area we were in was relatively secure. The installation of a place called Bearcat, 2 words, Bearcat, and they mean something in Vietnam, but I don't know what it is, was actually an installation that belonged to the Thai Army. Thailand had a division in Vietnam, and for whatever reason, we didn't get a lot of enemy action. We got mortared about 3 times at my home base during the year I was there. So we were fortunate. We were in permanent type buildings, wooden structures, but not air conditioned by any stretch of the imagination. But at least you could put a fan up, had electricity and stuff like that. And we had a little officers' club in a Quonset hut, and somewhere somebody had come up with a pool table. And by golly, I got to tell you, we had some real good pool players in the maintenance end. I shot a lot of pool. That's what I did most of it.
How did you spend your holidays?
I tried to spend my holidays working. After I became the maintenance officer, I didn't fly out every morning. My work started in the late afternoon when the aircraft started coming in. I mean, we had work to do during the day, but when the aircraft started coming in from working in the AO, they would come back and they would have problems. So they would start having, this one's having a little hydraulic glitch here, they got a leak on this here, they got an electrical bug somewhere. And I wanted to fly that aircraft the next day. So we had to bring it in and work on it, get it fixed, and in many cases test fly it, depending on what we had to do to it, before the next morning. So the really hectic time for us was between about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening and about 3 in the morning, which is my usual bedtime during that time frame. I would sleep from 3 or 4 in the morning until maybe 9 or 10.
So you were working backwards.
I was definitely on the swing shift, that kind of stuff. But it was necessary. It was kind of funny. We had Chuck Lang, my company commander, the fellow we talked about who was killed, had taken his R&R just a week before his death, and they had somebody come down from the battalion headquarters, which was located about 40 miles north of us, just to keep an eye on the company, and so forth. Well, and Chuck had said to this clown, he said, look, he says, look around, learn something about how a company worked, because he was a staff officer. And he says, if you want to fly, fly. He says, but don't touch anything, we got a good operation going here. And a week or so later, when Chuck came back, they talked, and the other fellow went back to Phuc Vinh. And that evening, Chuck came in and he said, you know what he said to me about you? I said, no telling. He says, you know what time your maintenance officer gets up in the morning? He says, what do you mean? He says, doesn't get up till like 10 in the morning. Chuck says, you ever seen what time he goes to bed? Yeah. So.
Yeah, I gotta get some sleep somewhere.
Yeah, I got a lot of night flight in those days. So.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
So you come back
the war
home?
ended. I came back from Vietnam, and I went back to Fort Belvoir, where I had started my military training for what they call the Engineer Officer Advanced course. And after that, I was sent back to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where I worked with the aviation division there. I was a command pilot and a maintenance officer for Fort Leavenworth, and that was where I was when the helicopter flew off the roof of the Saigon embassy, and they were pushing all the Chinooks and so forth off the fantail of the aircraft carriers in the South China Sea. So,
while you were in Vietnam, were you aware of the public opinion of the war itself?
we were fairly well informed. Most of us were getting hometown newspapers mailed to us by friends and family. The Stars and Stripes, obviously, it's a military paper, and they're concerned about troop morale. But given what was going on in the United States at that time, it was pretty much impossible for us not to be aware of what was going on. Kent State, for example, took place while I was in Vietnam. So,
after the war, you did come home for a stint before you continued on your military career, correct?
I had some leave. Yeah, I came home. I spent about 30 days with the family in Wichita, Kansas, where I was born.
How was that coming home?
There are people who had more intense combat experience than I did. I mean, here we're talking about the guy who was actually a grunt out in the jungle with a rifle in his hand and worried about that. And I know that a lot of them had trouble adjusting in some cases. We led, I won't say a normal existence as aviators, but I pretty much slept in the same rack every night. And I had electricity, and well, I didn't have running water, but I had electricity and I had a fan and stuff like that. I hadn't developed those survival instincts that, say, an infantryman had to know, that conflicted with normal life the way they had. So my transition back was fairly good. I was aware of loud noises for a long time. Shortly after I was about 30 days in Wichita, and then we went to Fort Belvoir, and I went into my new office. We were moving some furniture around in an old, high-ceilinged brick building, and a couple of guys were walking down the hallway right outside my office with a gray steel desk, and they both managed to lose their grip on it at the same instant. It dropped about a foot to the ground, and an empty steel desk hitting a concrete floor, whoa! And the first sergeant said, this was the wildest thing. He said, I heard this noise, and I turned around and looked in the company commander's office, and he wasn't there. So I'd gone under. It was incoming. It was incoming.
I've heard, or we hear about, that there was because of the negative effects of people's opinions on Vietnam, that sometimes they encourage the soldiers to come back as civilians instead of in their uniform. Did you have that problem?
We were never advised to do anything of that sort, at least not. I came back in January of '71. It might have been different after that. I don't think it happened before that. And I came back to the aircraft I flew on brought me all the way to New Jersey, up by Fort Dix. And so when I left, I got in a limousine and I rode over to Philadelphia Airport to come home. I think those guys who landed in San Francisco may have had a different experience than we did. I was in uniform. I had no problems coming home at all. In fact, God bless TWA. I landed in Chicago to switch for Wichita, and I moved to the other gate, handed the guy my ticket, and he took a ticket, and you could see, he looked at me, and he said, all right, uniform, yellow patch on the right sleeve, January, and brown as a berry. And he reached down and he handed me a first-class boarding pass. About the only time I ever flew first class in my life. It was perfect.
That's wonderful. what were some of the lasting effects of your term?
Gee, I don't know that I've ever thought about that. Other than the hearing loss. Lasting effects. I had very little use, and I have never had very much use for the people who denigrate the soldier because of the conflict. If you disagreed with Vietnam, that was your business. But to call a soldier a baby killer is absolutely unconscionable. There has been less of that given, say, Iraq and Afghanistan, but I still see it, and it angers me no end.
And from what I've read and I've heard, Vietnam left a scar on people's opinion of the Army and the government.
Well, it was very difficult to be a soldier for about 10 years after Vietnam. It was the budgets were very low. You didn't have fuel. You didn't have repair parts to do the training you needed to. And if you don't train, it's a little hard for you to suddenly pick up and say, oh, by the way, if something's flashed up over yonder, you got to go do your job. So it was difficult in that respect. I was fortunate, I think, in that I spent most of my career in the middle, what they call flyover country. I was Kansas, Missouri, Texas, places like that. The actual disdain for the military was not as apparent as it was on the left coast, as they call it, or in some of the major metropolitan areas, which I did not serve in. And I found by the early '80s, when I came to Westminster, I found that that had seemed to have pretty much gone away. I expected to go to Western Maryland College, McDaniel it is now. I expected to get a lot of guff. I thought it might not be that much fun serving there, but I found that actually the faculty were very normal people. They recognized that what we did was just as honorable as digging ditches or mowing lawns or whatever stockbrokers do. Breaking stock? I don't know. And so forth. So it was tough from the point of view of keeping your troopers motivated because of budgetary issues, but most of the time I have to say that I had a pretty easy. I think it was probably because of the geography of my assignments.
You retired in '92?
I retired in 1992.
So after Vietnam, were you still an aviator?
I was still an aviator. I flew as a combat pilot, or command pilot at Leavenworth, Kansas, and all that means is you're a pilot assigned to the airfield. So we flew big wigs here and there. We supported the school, helped out the state police every now and then. Well, we had a runaway girl that got herself into some trouble. We went doing some search and rescue, that kind of stuff. I also worked with a couple of reserve aviation units as an advisor and so forth, flew with them. In those days, the Army didn't have an aviation branch. You were commissioned in the infantry or the artillery or the Corps of Engineers or something like that, and you were an aviator. And so what they did is they assigned you to an aviation job and then to what they call your basic specialty, and then to another aviation job and so forth. So I also served, well, I said I didn't serve in any major metropolitan areas, but I did serve in Chicago with an engineer readiness group, and that was, our job there was to help Reserve and National Guard engineers training, help them keep their skills up, and so forth.
The Vietnam War would be, because it's such a major event, would be kind of bonding with your unit while you were with them. Did you have any lasting friendships?
Well, I'm still in daily email contact with one of the gentlemen that worked for me, retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 5. I'm a member of the 1st Cavalry Division Association. I'm a member of several associations. There's the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association, the Combat Helicopter Pilots Association, 1st Cav Association, things like that. So I have ways of keeping in touch with guys that I knew and so forth. In fact, the kid that snatched the aircraft from me that day in Vietnam is a lawyer in Florida right now. We're still in contact.
Do you go any of the reunions they have?
Mainly because I'm a cheapskate. I haven't been to too many, but I've decided in the last year or two that it's about time I started doing some of that. I've become more active with the local Military Officers Association, and I do go down. One thing I do every year is on Veterans Day I attend the services down at Vietnam Wall, and then those of us from the VHPA and the CHPA go over to the American Legion and tip a few, or maybe a few more.
Did you serve anywhere else in Europe or overseas?
I managed to get through 25 years of the Army, and I have never set foot in Europe. That's close to a miracle.
How did the Cold War difficulties differ from after the wall came down?
Oh, well, let me see. The wall came down in 89, right? And in 89, I was in Boston. That's right. I was in another reserve component assistance job. I kind of got typecast to help the reserves. And I was working with the 89th ARCOM in suburban Boston. Since we were a reserve unit, it didn't really affect us that much. I don't think there was that much response, other than obviously everyone was happy that the wall was down, Cold War was ending, and so forth. But we were kind of divorced, it's the wrong word, separated, remote from places like Fort Bragg or Fort Hood, where there would have been, obvious relief that they're not going to be called upon to suddenly fly into the Fulda Gap.
What did you do during the Gulf War at the end of your term?
During the Gulf War, I made 127,000 reserve component soldiers very mad at me.
How did you do that?
Is the way I say it. I was the Chief of Strength Management for 1st United States Army, which was the headquarters at Fort Meade, Maryland at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And my job included mobilization. So when Desert Shield first came into being, we had to activate the mobilization plans, and you may or may not be aware that that's the first time the United States Army mobilized since the Korean War.
Okay, didn't know that.
So we were doing something that nobody alive with current memory had ever done, and we had to get the units up to strength, transfer people from one unit to another, and bring them to active duty, get them trained, and get them to where they could be used, and so forth. And then we had to get them back where they started, and so forth. And then I'm really pretty proud that we did an exceptional job, I think, on that. I'll say about 127,000 soldiers. Anybody east of the Mississippi who went on who was called to active duty in that time frame, my name was on the blame line. I'm the guy that
got him going.
Yeah.
You told us about your most memorable experience. What was the funniest one?
The funniest one?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody's got stories.
Oh boy. Well, that may have been the day we played games with a B-52 pilot. In Vietnam, we were closely located. There were two installations that were so close together that they had a common wire, a common defensive fence, but they had separate berm being the earthen wall you pushed up. And there was, over here at a little place called Long Thon, which next door to Bearcat, there was an Air Force FAC detachment, forward air controllers. These guys flew Cessna push-pull, the twin Cessnas that have an engine there and an engine there, twin boom. And these guys, they were assigned to the Thais, and they found out real fast that they could not handle Thai food morning, noon, and night. It was that simple. So they found out we had the best mess hall in the immediate area. So they started eating with us. Great fun. And we found out that one of these guys was a B-52 pilot. And why the military does things, you know, they must have their reasons, but sometimes this fellow had been flying B-52s for 3 years. He was ready to take his aircraft commander certification ride. And they said, "Oh, we got orders for you, Captain. You're going to go over there and fly a Cessna." And fly around and look down and say, "Oh, I see somebody there." So we got him one day and said, "Well, we're going to fly down to Vung Tau Harbor and get rid of some junk. And you're more than welcome to come along. You're an old multi-engine pilot. Maybe you'd like to see how a helicopter flies, you know." Okay, so he was free that afternoon. We took him out and we gave him a checkout, you know, showed him how things worked in the aircraft. And then we took off, headed south. We got down toward Vung Tau. Vung Tau Harbor is this big, gorgeous, beautiful harbor. I mean, Lord, I would like to have been there when there wasn't a war going on. And we said, "Well, here, straight and level flight, why don't you fly?" So we get him into the seat. I get out of the seat, he gets in, he gets strapped in, and he, you know, gingerly moves things around and gets an idea that it works pretty much like other aircraft do. And then I said, "Well, that's pretty good." I said, "Let's see, we'll do a little, how about emergency procedures?" And he kind of looked at me, you know. I said, "Yeah." I said, "For instance, what would happen if I did this?" And I reached down, and they have these two great big levers on the console. They're called the engine condition levers. And this is flight, idle, and stop.
Okay.
I said, "What would you do if I did this?" And I grabbed them and I pulled them both the engines to stop. Now, we have two engines. Both of them are at stop. And we're about 500 feet above Vung Tau Harbor. He literally broke the clock in the dash. He bouncing around. "You can't have done that," and so forth. "Well, no, I hadn't. They're circuit breakers that disable the levers." So I pulled the circuit breakers while he wasn't looking. That way you could do anything you wanted with the levers. It wasn't going to change what's going on with the engines at all. But he never really completely forgave us for that. You know? we swore he had to get a new flight suit, but he denies that. It's black humor, but that's the way it was in Vietnam. You know.
You said that a neighboring unit came over to eat in your mess hall. I'm assuming that means you had better food.
I don't say our food was real good, but they were subsisting with the Thai army, and that kind of food, that kind of spice and heat. You know, if you're born and raised in America, it's one thing to go out to a Thai restaurant, and maybe even 2 or 3 times a week, but you get to the point where you'd like to get scrambled eggs for breakfast, you know, or a bologna sandwich or something like that. And so they came over and they just signed on ours, and their money was deducted by the Air Force somewhere, and we didn't worry too much about that.
Yes, you had pretty good provisions with yours?
We shouldn't really complain. You know, every group complains about its chow. That's one of those things. If you have a soldier who is happy with his chow, he is probably not right, you know. But no, we had pretty good chow. It was a little monotonous. There wasn't a lot of variety. I told my wife when I got home, as a matter of fact, and this will sound strange, but I said, "Do not feed me roast beef for a while," because we had lots of roast beef, overcooked, dry roast beef, and it was protein. But Lord, there was a time you just said, she was kind of get a bologna sandwich.
What kind of other, besides roast beef, that they killed you with? What other kind of foods did they give you to eat?
We had this interesting milk, which was, what they did is they took powdered milk in the United States, shipped it to Vietnam. They had a company in Vietnam that then reconstituted it with water and put it in 1 quart you know, standard pinch top cartons and gave us that. It was pretty bad. You had to get it real cold, and that was always a problem. Because while there was refrigeration in the mess hall, as soon as something came out, you got to remember it came out of the refrigerator into ambient temperatures that held at 100. So it was hard to get a cold glass of milk or a cold beer or a cold soda or anything like that. We had a lot of salad. Boy, we had a lot of salad. And powdered eggs. Powdered eggs.
There is such a thing.
Well, you know, it's like I said, sometimes you like to just get scrambled eggs, but sometimes you'd like to get an egg that isn't scrambled.
So what were you looking forward to when you got home? Normal food?
I think when I got home, I really wanted to get a good old-fashioned grease burger. You know, hamburger, fries, hot dog, that kind of stuff. Pizza. I would have killed for pizza the whole time I was over there. They may have had it other places, but they weren't available for us. In fact, the strangest thing is the PX at Long Bend, a few miles north of us, which we got up to every month or two, had a nice big PX restaurant called Loon Foons, and you could get Chinese food. You know, I said, where is the Pizza Hut, guys?
I noticed that you have books and medals over there. Did you want to share some of that with the Congress?
Oh, I wasn't sure what you guys wanted to see. I've got a few things. Some of the medals that were being sent frequently in the old days, they would run out of them, so they would send you a, that's what they did. They would give you your certificate and everything else like that, you know, and then it would be whether or not they issued the medal. And I didn't get one or two of them, so a few months ago I contacted the National Personnel Records Center and I said, I don't think I was ever issued this and this, can you confirm that and maybe send me the medals? So, and they ended up sending me a complete issue of everything, so from my senior aviator badge to, and I don't know why, they sent me a regular aviator badge, and this one supersedes that one, but bureaucrats, you know. I was awarded it at one time, that's probably why they sent it to me. The thing I'm probably proudest of is my Ranger tab. And what else have we got hidden in here? My pistol marksmanship badge. They give you everything. God love them. No, I'm not sure why these are separate. Oh, these are the ribbons. These are the ribbons. Don't worry about the ribbons. This was the one that they never issued me that I had originally written about, and that's the Vietnam Service Medal. And the number of stars on the medal are determined by how many campaigns you were actually a part of, and that's just a decision that was made by some general somewhere that said, well, you know, this was this and that counteroffensive, and then at this point in time, it went from that counteroffensive to this campaign to that campaign. So I was there for 3. What we got here? The Air Medal. That has a 12 on it because, and this makes a lot of sense, I know, I have 13 Air Medals. What they do is they give you an Air Medal, and then if they give you a subsequent Air Medal, you get a 1.
So you
Two
add
more
that
Air
to
Medals,
the
you
actual...
get 2 and stuff like that. And the Air Medal is for, basically it has to do with how much flying you did over there. So 12 Air Medals means I got about 600 combat hours in the Chinook. Which is this guy. Ah, yes. The National Defense Service Medal, or as we used to call it, the I Was Alive in '65 medal. It's been awarded to soldiers since World War II. And in fact, I have a star on it for a second award because sometime about the end of the Cold War, they decided they would break the period that it was awarded for and start another one. So, I wasn't really aware of it until I got it. So I don't know what this one is. Yeah, that's my Bronze Star. And that was, I'm proud of it. It was one of those things that if you were an officer and you stayed straight, didn't do anything stupid in Vietnam, you got a Bronze Star. Army Commendation Medal, and I've got an oak leaf cluster on that one, which means I have 2. And I honestly don't remember what those were for. Those were both from stateside service. Did something well. At the end of a tour, they give you a medal to move on. And let's see, this will be, yeah, that's the, whoops, that's the Meritorious Service Medal. I probably won't show too well on either of those. With a couple of oak leaf clusters. One of those I'm very proud of because I got it as a captain, but that includes, one of those is the medal I was given when I retired. So, other than that, gee whiz, what else is of interest? I've got, oh yeah, here, why don't you take that? I have my yearbook from Vietnam. They actually published this just about a month after I got in country. Mm-hmm. And so, as it happens, there's my life membership certificate in the 1st Cav Division. Even has my battalion commander's name in it, as luck would have it. This is the page, first page is for my battalion, the 228th Aviation Battalion, which some action pictures of those big, noisy, oily monsters. God, I love them. Battalion crest here, and this guy down here, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Toner, mm-hmm. who was the battalion commander when I arrived in country, and became, I felt, a pretty good friend the time I was there. Retired as a lieutenant general. That's a 3-star. So some of us Chinook aviators can do things right. What was this? Oh yeah. That's a slide. I need to have that converted to a picture. My company was designed, the guys that put together the tables of organization and equipment and said, okay, you need this many aircraft, all that kind of stuff. Did it assuming that the company would fly about 900 hours a month. And that picture there is of a graph we had of May of 1970 when we flew 1,870 hours. So we pretty much doubled what they wanted us to do. It was a big deal. This was my tactical map. I haven't looked at that guy in a while. What we did here was what most of us did. We took a bigger map, cut a portion of it that we needed out, and then put sticky acetate plastic on it so we could write on it with a pencil, a grease pencil.
And then you could erase it later.
Sorry?
You could erase it later or make changes if you needed to.
Yeah, you can. In fact, there's still some marks on it, I think. You'll find, like right here. And whatnot. Things have been folded 30 years. Doesn't want to unfold. But this was what we used to navigate from point A to point B. This covered pretty much the area of operations for us. And you can see that here is Saigon. And if you go down here, if I can find it. It's been a long time. Oh. Yeah, it doesn't show. This was where this is where I lived. It says Long Pond, but Bearcat was right next to it. And we flew north and west of Saigon and up to the 2 3/4 border. We had mountains, we had rice paddy, we had a little bit of everything flying in and over. Yeah, what else? Oh, when you guys called and talked about doing something like this, it reminded me that I had at one time before sat down and done some writing, thinking that my kids might be interested, particularly my grandkids, in what was going on. And the way my memory seems to be going as I get a little bit older, I thought I would write a few things down. So I put together some not far from comprehensive, but memories of what I did there, a little this and that.
Did you have a memorable section or something you wanted to read out of that?
A memorable...
A memorable, like a section or a quote out of your piece that you
Oh,
wanted to read?
gee. Actually, I think maybe... yeah, my last one in there. Yeah, I think the most memorable thing I wrote about in there was about 2 months into my tour. We had flown a long day, and we in fact had finished all the work in our brigade area, had gone to the farthest brigade area from us to help out the sister company finish up its work. And then just before we got home, back to Bearcat, we were within sight of Bearcat, we could see the lights. It was full night. We found out that one load had not been picked up back in our original area in the morning. And it was a broken vibropack. A vibropack is a compacting instrument. It's something you tow behind a truck, and it compacts the earth. And we had flown in one that worked, and that afternoon we were supposed to fly the broken one back so it could be repaired. And somehow or other that one slipped by the mission commander whom I was flying with. It was our fault. And so I'm saying to myself, all right, it's 10 o'clock at night. This thing is sitting at a special forces camp, which doesn't have lights. Anything else like that? I said, so, all right, mea culpa, we'll take care of it first thing in the morning. This guy, and the guy I was flying with, instead of doing that, decided it's time to go get it. So he turns us around, he flies us out. We refuel at the nearest brigade camp, and then he heads up toward the Special Forces camp, and I'm sitting there, I'm a new guy in country, like I say, a month, 6 weeks. And I said, how do you expect to find this place? There's no rotating beacon, and they don't even keep their radio on, because it's in batteries, and so forth. He says, oh, no problem. So he flew at 100 feet over the road with his landing light on it, and which, of course, makes you a target light. We flew up there, found the place, and then in hovering around trying to get the vibropack, find out if it's still on the log pad, he gets himself into what we call IFR in the dust. IFR is instrument flight regulations. You can't see outside the cockpit. He's flying along, stops, the dust zooms up around you. You don't know how high you are. You don't know from nothing. So he pulls the pitch and tries to suck us straight up out of it, which is about the only thing you can do. And he's relying on these instruments, and I'm looking down at the instruments on the panel and not believing them because my ears are telling me the same thing his ears are. And we came out of the cloud in an extreme nose-low attitude with an extreme rate of descent, and I could see the tree line coming right at me. And he managed to right the aircraft and get us out of there. We got home that night, and I told the company commander, I said, this was a mission that didn't have to fly, and this clown went out there and he risked 4 people and me and $1.5 million worth of aircraft for this non-essential mission. I said, just rest assured, sir, I ain't flying with him again. And I didn't.
What do you want your grandchildren or future generations to know about your service?
I want them to know that I'm proud of my service. I think that the military is one of the last real honorable professions, one that has a stake in honesty and truth, and your word being your bond that you have to count on. I want them to understand that no matter what the clowns out there on the streets in San Francisco or wherever it may be are saying, that we're not the bad guys. We're the guys doing what we're told. We're the guys defending the Constitution. Like I say, maybe I should sit down and think about that and write about that, but I haven't really given. I'm not quite old enough to say, what am I going to say when they come in and I'm choking to death? No, proud of my service, proud of the military, and that they should always recognize that the soldier is the last line of defense, and he deserves their thanks.
Thank you very much for your interview and being part of this program.
Well, thank you for asking me. I really enjoyed it.
And we thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. You're welcome.